welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of the day's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Sean Kalin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Michelle Penix, Lighthouse Christian Church, Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches, Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, and Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, New Albany Centenary United Methodist Church. We begin this week with the impacts of the current U.S. trade tariff policy.
Just 1 week after upending global trade with his sweeping tariffs, President Trump hitting the brakes, citing growing concern on Wall Street.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
Just hours earlier, the president had urged Americans to be cool, saying everything is going to work out well, adding this is a great time to buy. In the week since he unveiled his massive tariffs, the market's in a tailspin. But the president had insisted he was staying the course. In the Oval Office on Monday, I asked him if a pause was on the table. Would you be open to a pause in tariffs to allow for negotiations?
Well, we're not looking at that. We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals.
But the pressure from worried investors, frustrated businesses, and anxious Americans, too much to bear. Just 13 hours after his sweeping tariffs went into effect, the president with that stunning about face, announcing he's pausing his so-called reciprocal tariffs for 90 days on all countries but China to allow time to negotiate. Pressed on what changed, Trump acknowledging the turmoil in the markets.
Over the last few days, it looked pretty glum.
The administration now racing to negotiate. They say over 75 countries are eager to strike a deal. White House officials insisting this pause will buy them enough time.
We're going to have just a beautiful set of custom suit deals for each one of these countries where everyone in America is going to be better off.
So panel will come out to you. Your perspectives on the ethical implications of the tariff policy and what responsibilities do leaders have in weighing domestic priorities against the broader goal of global economic stability?
Well, I'll jump in to say that, you know, from a moral side, I think when we talk about leadership and we talk about the importance of truth and honesty, I think that what we're seeing now is a lot of uncertainty and instability, unfortunately, and that leads to a lack of truth and honesty. And I think that what hurts the most about this is those that are most affected, the very least of these, the most vulnerable, the ones who will ultimately pay the highest cost. We don't know what to really believe. We've had 80 days of talk around tariffs, and they went up and down and up and down, and every day is something different. And it's hard as families to plan for that. It's hard thinking about, you know, going back to school and can I afford tennis shoes? Do I need to buy a new car now? Should I wait? Those are the people that I think we most need to be concerned about at this time and how tariffs affect them.
I think one of the things that actually excites me a little bit right now is that the United States, we have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit right now. And when we look at things like tariffs, you know, we are bringing in a whole lot more than what we are selling to other countries. And it should work to our advantage to actually flip those, because I've seen, you know, folks from the auto industry say, yes, we're excited about this because people will buy more domestic cars made here in the United States. Blue collar workers, folks, you know, I just saw on the news that Gretchen Whitmore from Michigan she is coming out in full support of the tariffs. Her state being a state, Michigan, which is highly driven by the auto industry. And so, you know, I think the reality is we live in uncertain times, right? We live in chaotic times, and we have to do pivots. We have to make choices. We have to do changes. Is it chaotic? It is. But we're living in chaotic times, trying to figure out how do we get this ship that I compare to kind of like those barges on the Ohio River. You know, those things, the captains know a mile away from the bridge if they're going to hit it, right? And so they have to make incremental changes. Well, these changes that we're trying to make to get our country into a more stable position to really benefit everyone, it's going to be chaotic for a while.
But But the chaos just seems so random. It doesn't seem to have a plan behind it. It's up one day, down the next, changes his mind in 13 hours. And the people that most concern me, I agree, Michelle, are those who are living on the margins, or the farmers who are wondering about what's going to be best for me as I try to get a crop sold and get the next one and then the field. And so what concerns me is, okay, right the ship, but give us a steady go, because when has it been this chaotic before, with up and down and changing the mind and making allies into enemies? I mean, that's my concern too. Is the flip of that is where does it how does this then implicate us in relationship with the others with whom we share the world?
Well, part of my thinking though is to just kind of flip your words a little bit. You're saying this is kind of like everything's so unplanned. I think this chaos is planned. I think it's deliberate. I think it's a strategic way in which he operates, of threatening, bullying, and then backing off of that. Oh, look how nice I can be. And I don't think that's the way to lead myself.
Right.
I know, yes, good, I think everybody understands. This is not a live, we're taping it live, but this is not happening on Sunday morning. What we're doing right now, we're talking about. And yesterday, the president was claiming that he was able to give back to the United States people the biggest increase in the stock market ever. The biggest stock, yesterday when he backed off his promise. Now, a day later, we're having one of the biggest, steepest losses again, ever. So it's kind of pendling back and forth. And I do think one of the things that has not been talked about is the reason we're in somewhat this situation with large imports is because we've been able to import them cheaper. And so therefore, it does help our poor people to have the ability to get access to things at a cheaper, lower level than when the prices begin to go up on all these things. Now, maybe 10 years, 15 years from now, but for the immediate foreseeable future, the most vulnerable people are the ones who are going to suffer the most. And that seems to be very deliberate and very intentional based on what the president is saying. This is what I'm intending to do. Long term is going to help, but short term, you're out of luck.
I'm unsure of how the system works. You take all of our cars, even if the car is made and assembled in the United States of America, there will be parts, let's say, the air conditioning system that is made in Mexico or made in Canada or made somewhere else. But 90% of the vehicle is made and assembled in the United States. How is that vehicle tariffed or not? I don't get it.
Well, I can give you an example about, variety in cars. I just came back from a recent experience in Egypt, and one of the things that I noticed was America's difference was in variety. We love variety. We love a variety of cars, a variety of food, a variety of clothes. In Egypt, where I was, and there were 22 million people in the city, variety didn't matter as much. Cars were all small. You did not see a Yukon. You did not see SUVs. You also saw 6 lanes of traffic and 8 cars across it. And as a result, they were no less happy. They were no less satisfied with their lives. And I think morality causes us to look at honesty with ourselves about America being a country of consumers. We buy. We have the privilege and the opportunity to buy a variety of cars, to have a variety when it comes to clothes and to food. And quite honestly, I think this is where the generational gap sometimes comes into play. Our children don't want those jobs. They're in health and finance and technology. They're not desperate for, our communities are not desperate for just the old manufacturing jobs that used to be there. I remember as a principal just a couple of years ago, the #1 job for my kindergartners when they grew up was not astronaut or doctor, it was YouTube star. And that's probably where we need to come to reality with where we are today.
I think one of the shifts that I'm again positive that I hope is beginning to have is that for a very long period of time we've tended to look at things with such a short term. We got to fix it now. We got to change it now. We need now. Kind of that oversupply. We have so many things to choose from. I've traveled a little bit outside the United States as well. You look at cereal. You know what we have to offer in a cereal aisle is the whole aisle. You go to other countries and there's just a few cereal choices. And so we do have this consumerist mentality, but I think some of the shifts that we're seeing both with the trade deficit and with tariffs I'm hoping, is an effort to stabilize some of that so that we begin to see there are lots of things that we can make here. I mean, it wasn't very long ago that we had COVID, right? And what did we run out of? Everything that we don't make here in the United States, that there was a shortage of PPP, there was a shortage of chips for your computers. I mean, so many things were delayed because this trade deficit that we have, where we have things that aren't made here that could be made here, and quite frankly, I think should be made here, that we aren't making here. And so I think the attempt, at least again, what I'm seeing is even amidst this chaos to say, wow, we have a president who he's not working towards the next 4 years after now. He's working towards this 4 years that he's in because he won't be able to run again. And so I think he's able to make some changes that maybe in the past presidents have been afraid to make because they don't address some of the deeper systemic issues to really right the ship, to change the barge, to get things going, because they're wondering, hey, what do I got to do right now to make sure I get elected again 4 years from now? So I'm hopeful. Do I understand it all? I don't. But I want to be hopeful because I think we are a people. I mean, we're getting close to Easter, right? As Easter, we recognize the fact that we are people of hope. So we look forward to what might be. And so that's kind of where I'm landing amidst the trade and deficit things right now. I want to retain that hope.
Yeah. And one of the things, though, that hasn't been mentioned much, one of my moral concerns in some of this, too, though, it's not only mentioned by us, but just I don't hear this kind of conversation either. There was a time when leadership in our country and people in general were concerned about also the way that people who were involved in manufacturing in the countries were treated, too, as well. You know, we had concern about child labor and exploitation of people that was sometimes used to create a very cheap product so that we could then buy it. And I certainly wouldn't want to see, you know, other countries now having to say, oh, we got to make it cheaper now, even more cheaply, and therefore start getting back into it. I think we should be concerned about what's going on in other countries as well. And that I'm not always hearing either in some of the rhetoric about the way the trades are being set up and the tariffs are being assigned. You know, all we're looking at is getting as much as we can for us and not being concerned about what's going on in a lot of these other countries as well in terms of their practices. And I think we have a responsibility, you know, to also lead that way as well. So,
George, you touched on something about, your comment was that products should be made here. And I think that brings up a good point that or could be made here. And I think that puts the responsibility back on the manufacturers and those who choose to take the American-based companies out of this country, take them to another place that gives them incentives and cheap labor, unfortunately, and places people at risk or underage people working. And so that becomes this unraveling of what as well. So where's the who is then responsible for placing that responsibility back on manufacturers and company decision makers to say, stay here and do what is right?
Well, and I think that's part of what we've seen historically is that because we have such a large trade deficit, a $1.2 trillion trade deficit, for instance, you can't buy an American car in Japan, right? Well, why not? Well, that's just how the trade is set up. We have 70 plus countries who are now coming back to the United States amidst this conversation to say, let's negotiate what these tariffs are looking like, because quite frankly, we have been taken advantage of. And so I think that, you know, we're beginning to see, President Trump has talked about manufacturers and other folks coming back here now saying, hey, actually, if we place a high enough tariff, it really is advantageous to bring it back here and put it in the United States. So again, that's the hopeful part that I have, is that I think, again, and Gretchen Whitmer, a person who I don't really agree with much of anything that she says, she is coming in full endorsement of this now, saying, no, this is good for us because we're going to keep our manufacturing jobs and we're going to build manufacturing jobs here in the United States to compete with some of the things that we're seeing in other countries.
Well, that's the really difficult part, because when we talk about uncertainty and instability, it's hard for me to imagine that manufacturers in this climate say now's the perfect time to spend and invest millions, if not billions of dollars on new factories and manufacturing places when you don't know what's going to happen. I'd love to get you on the record when you said that he can't run for another term, because that's part of the instability as well. We don't know what the future holds, although we know who holds the future. We don't know from his own words what to plan for and how that looks. And from a leadership perspective, it's important that we hear and understand your words, and that it's not just coming from you, but that it is coming from others. If he says 75 countries have come and sat at the table and want to negotiate, who else knows this? Who else knows who those 75 countries are? Who else is in the room? Who else can speak to this? It just feels like it's all in his mind, all in what he wants to do. And I think leadership needs to be shared.
And I still think that it still doesn't, to my mind, address, though, that the reason this deficit is here is in large part because the American consumer wanted it that way. You know, if I have a choice between a fruit, a vegetable, a car, and I feel like it's got a value, and I can get the exact same product for a lower amount, then I'm going to typically go for that lower amount. And if I can find that fruit, vegetable, car, whatever it might be, the way it gets to be cheaper here is because it can be made cheaper somewhere else. And so the reason manufacturing, I think, has left this country in large part is because those very companies realized they could again produce that product and pay the shipping cost and pay whatever import taxes were on it in the past and still be cheaper. And therefore more people would buy it. And that's again because we demand that.
Well, and that's been a function of both the trade deficit and also the tariffs, is that the tariffs that other countries have charged us has been higher than the tariffs that we have charged other countries. And so even offshoring something, having something made in another country with the current state of tariffs, is it can still be made cheaper over there and brought over here because we have a deficit. Well, from a leadership perspective, if we say, so how do we even this playing field a little bit more? Does that mean that we need to raise our tariffs? Like, you know, we know there are products that have 150, 200, 270% tariff rate for other countries. Well, again, it's just going to perpetuate this problem if we don't, from a leadership perspective, say, so how do we level the playing field so that there's either no tariff, or if you charge me 5% to have my goods in your country, then I should charge you 5% in this country. And it is not even. That's why we have a trade deficit. And so we create this systemic thing that just keeps going and going and going. And if there's not something that's thrown into the cog to get it to stop or get it to get into chaos, so to speak, we're not going to fix the problem. And again, I think, as we have talked about on this panel before, we also have limited information, right? We don't have the nitty-gritty of all the details and all the back meetings and things that are talking about this. But I saw an interview with our Treasury Secretary, who I think is a super smart guy, and he said, this is actually really good for us because we do have these countries now coming to us saying, how do we level this field so that the tariff situation, at the very least, gets closer to equal, so that we don't have to buy these goods from outside the United States, and they could be made here for a comparable price.
But why is China still on the tariff table at 125%? I don't understand. Why China? All of a sudden, I mean, I know there's some animus between President Trump and Xi, the leader of China, but why, and does that make sense in the process, George?
And I'm going to have to say, I don't know. Why China? I don't know all the specifics about China. I know we buy a lot of things from China. They are in the top 3, China, Canada, and Mexico, that charge us the highest tariffs of any other countries. So why them? I don't have a good answer for you. So I don't know.
I'm not sure we have enough time to go on another topic. I want to stay on this one because I have a question for you all. So our colleague, Tony Cruz, WHS Radio in the Mornings, had a conversation with a guest this week, and he referenced that how to relieve stress was the #1 Google searched question last week. And I feel like that's a sign of the times we're living in. And you mentioned chaotic, and all of your congregation, I'm sure, is in the same boat, dealing with their 401ks up and down. And what's this mean for me? I'm about to retire, or this, or whatever. Just everyday prices and everything they hear. What is your message to your congregations, that to a message of hope? But what can you say to people that are dealing with the chaotic times and the stress that we have right now?
So we talk about, where do you put your trust? Is your trust in the stock market, or is your trust in the one who's more powerful than the stock market? Right? We talk about where we put our faith, where are we grounded in what we think about what's going on in our world today. You know, for us as from the Christian tradition, the Bible says that we will have difficulties in this life, but it says take heart, because those difficulties have been overcome. So if we have a short-term, very short-sighted perspective of, oh my gosh, today, what do I got to do today, instead of saying, but what's on the horizon? What's coming? You know, one of our slogans in church world is, well, Sunday's coming. And so it's trying to have a long-term perspective instead of just a short-term. At least that's what we talk about.
Well,
About
I
5
think,
minutes left.
yeah, I think it's also about, our relationship with him, but our relationship with one another, treating others the way we want to be treated. Remembering that, in our darkest times, it's about helping our neighbors. It's about loving those that we don't know well. It's about how we make sure that we all benefit from whatever is available to us, and that we're not going it alone. And I think that in times like these of uncertainty and instability, it is important that we stop, that we recognize who is in ultimate control, that he has a plan for all of our lives, a purpose for all of our lives, but also that we don't do harm to ourselves, that we make sure that we are doing our due diligence in making sure we maintain our relationship with him and with one another.
Good word.
I think it's also about giving practical steps of what we can do. Like, take some deep breaths and go outside and look at spring flowers coming up, and that spring green we only see this time of year. And that's not to sound trite, it's true to take that pause, because we can get so sucked into the news of the day. And what do we do? What do we believe? And how can we plan for our future? Then it's relying on one another. And I think it's leaning into the story that we hear from the people around us and their pain. And we may not be able to do anything with it, but we can certainly sit with it together. And then the other piece, I think, is to do what we can do, to do what we have the power to do our speaking out, to do our peaceful protest, to do our, to share our angst and vulnerability, so that people know they're not in a vacuum.
We are, all of us, beings created in the image and likeness of God. And we just have to sit down and focus on, what does that mean in our behavior? What does that mean in our expectations about how other people will behave toward us, and just go forward.
I like
I
that.
think with
Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, just that so oftentimes with whether stress or depression or those kinds of things, the temptation is to turn inward and focus only on oneself. And I think that oftentimes when I'm like even counseling somebody who's been through a significant loss in their life, and people are experiencing significant losses right now in terms of their future, at least the perception of their future, is that one of the ways you begin to heal is to look outward as well, and to figure out what can I do to be able to look to what's next going to happen. No longer have this option, no longer have this option, but I do still have these options. Or to become involved in some kind of volunteer work. I mean, as much as any of us who are here struggling, and those watching are struggling, there are people who are struggling more than us. And so how can I be attentive to that? And I do think that is a good example of the way our faith and all religions across the board call us to always be focused outward and not just inward. And that's where I think leads to sometimes that healing process, when I can say, yes, I'm struggling right now, but I still want to be in solidarity with other people who are too. And that's true across the world. You know?
Let me make an example from your point.
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
We're sitting in the WHAS television studio, and I think what WHAS did yesterday is so emblematic of that, in that yesterday was supposed to be Thunder Over Louisville Day.
Yes.
WHAS was the flagship channel for Thunder Over Louisville this year. We all know that you can't control the weather, and look what happened. But what this station did, I think behaviors like this will bring us forward. They decided to mount an impromptu telethon helping the American Red Cross relieve the suffering from all of the flooding and weather that we've fought with just lately, and indeed this entire year. We need to think about what we can do as individuals and as a community to promote goodness and promote healing.
I liked your words
And
that
love.
you said, lean in, because to me it reminds me of all the one anothers that we see in the Bible, is that we need one another. The Bible says we were created to be in community with one another. I think that speaks volume for us.
Thank you, well said. And this program, I think, is a great example. Everybody has different opinions, and you're all here, and everybody's getting along just great today. Thank you to our panelists today, Reverend Michelle Penix, Lighthouse Christian Church, Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary, St. William Catholic Churches, Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, and Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, New Albany Centenary United Methodist Church. Thanks for watching and joining us this week on Moral Side of the News. Join us next week for an all-new Moral Side of the News.